E hoa atua o ngā iwi mataura a ta whakarongoa a te aroha kia hua ko te he pai ki a tātou a ta whai. Mana ki tia mai au te aroha. God of nations, at thy feet, in the bonds of love we meet. Hear our voices, we entreat. God defend our free land. God of Pacific's triple star, from the shafts of strife and war, make her praises heard afar. God defend New Zealand. Men of every creed and race, gather here before thy face, asking thee to bless this place. God defend our free land from dissension, envy, hate, and corruption. Guide our state, make our country good and great. God defend New Zealand. Peace, not war, shall be our boast, but should foes assail our coast, make us then a mighty host. God defend our free land, Lord of battles, in thy might, put our enemies to flight. Let our cause be just and right. God defend New Zealand. Oh, morena, morena, morena. Aroha e te whānau. Had a bit of a croaky voice this morning, not too sure why. So sorry for that terrible rendition of our uh, national anthem. Hopefully I didn't puckaroo it, but the heart was willing, the voice just wasn't quite there. And I was trying to maintain my voice whilst trying to concentrate on the words at the same time. So anyway, whānau, I just think, gosh, when you read those or listen to those words, they are very powerful. What a powerful national anthem we do have. And if anything, that's the karakia that should be done in our parliament every time parliament sits as our national anthem. So let's bring our national anthem back to parliament. Let's do a petition on that, shall we? Hey, e ki rā, they take karakia out of our parliament. And I think bringing back the national anthem and getting them to stand to our national anthem is what we should be doing and what they should be doing every time Parliament sits. I love that idea. I love that idea. And yes, Catherine, the words were so inspiring. I was feeling them. It's just my voice wasn't feeling. So aroha mai. I did try my best. Kia ora, Maria. Thank you for tuning in. Kia ora, Catherine. Kia ora, Kataraina. Jill, awesome to have you on. Oh, you fellas are awesome. Desiree, Cherie. Yeah, well, I've got an important guest coming on shortly, so I thought I'd do our our national anthem as she's just messaged me, and yes, she's going to come on at 9 o'clock. So, whānau, if you've got any questions for Sue, please get them ready. Yes, we should recite the oath. That's why they are there. Absolutely, absolutely. So there absolutely is going to be a petition, and those Luciferians that might be amongst amongst some of the peeps that we thought were representing us, they will cringe every time they have to sing our national anthem, and that national anthem will expose the kino ones that are there, rather than the ones that are there to uphold uphold what that national anthem is saying. So yeah, I am quite inspired by all of this. So I will be singing the national anthem or ka aroha. I might have to find someone who or someone who's got a beautiful voice, nicer than mine, who wants to do the Māori version and the English version. I mean, there are a number of um, verses, but each verse. So I sang 2 verses yesterday, sang 3 verses today, and I'll sing 4 verses tomorrow. And I just want us to get used to it. So it's not like I'm singing to myself. I'm singing to us, and hopefully you'll join me in the national, our beautiful national anthem. And you can Google the words, and they will come up, both the Māori version and the English version. So I feel blessed, and I think it lays a good foundation for our kōrero, and first for ourselves as well. Oh, your voice is perfect. I don't think so. I've got whānau that have got, angelic voices. And my voice is was good for kapahaka. Every time if you had the odd flat note, you could hide behind other people's voices. So anyway, I hope I did it justice. Kia ora, Vinny, and Sheena, and Paula. You fellas are awesome for joining in. So what questions do you want to ask Sue? Please put your questions up. So she's going to come on shortly. We've got a few more minutes before she comes on. There are a number of things that I wanted to talk about as well. In particular, I follow Gareth Morgan, one because he was my boss when I was part of the Opportunities Party, and he created the Opportunities Party's policies. And whilst I was there, I was kaitiaki of his policies once he left the party, and I was able to, he gifted them to me and said, wherever you go, you can take those policies and implement whichever ones you want. So I feel grateful. One that he saw me as a kaitiaki of those policies. But what I do want to talk about it, and maybe it's something I can talk to Sue about, is his whakaaro around EV cars, electric vehicle cars. I read a comment on his page yesterday, which was, I thought it was really good, and so he was saying in his comments, he was saying why we should tax EVs. So I'll read that out to Sue when Sue comes online. But can I see any questions? Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll look at seeing if I can do up a petition to bring our national anthem back into Parliament, and that they have to stand and sing the national anthem. And this will expose people, eh? Those that don't have a righteous heart, or a righteous God heart, they will be exposed in Parliament, and we can see them for who they are. Just getting rid of karakia doesn't expose them. Getting them to do and we should make that some. Uh, um, I think we should put that into law or into their manual, that they have to stand and do our national anthem, which is a karakia as well. Morena, Kala, yes, they need to be exposed. What does Maria say? Oh, here comes Sue. Here comes Sue. So I'm really excited about interviewing Sue this morning. So I'll bring her on board. Why did that post you put up? Okay. Okay, I'll bring Sue on now. Okay, and put your questions up, please. Morena, 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 e te rangatira. How are we this morning?
Morena, Donna, so lovely to talk to you again.
Aren't we fortunate to be able to do this? Like, I don't even have to be in Tauranga. I don't know if you realise, Sue, but our last interview went viral.
Yeah, I saw it, isn't it? It's so exciting to just be able to talk to the world it's amazing. It's amazing.
How's it going? Because I know you're working really, really hard, Sue. How's it going for you?
Yeah, look, it's been amazing. I'm getting so much support, and I've got the new hat now, so people can spot
Woo!
me a mile away. And the t-shirt. Look at the t-shirt.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Awesome colours too, Sue.
Yeah, it's really great, and we've got the team have got them as well. So look out for these hats and t-shirts around, and come and say hi and get some information, and come to our meetings and all those things, because it makes it easier. Some people are a little bit shy to come and say hi, but I think
Oh.
if we've got the t-shirt and the hat on, they feel a little bit more confident. So that's really, really a good thing, because I want to talk to as many people as possible and listen to people's views. There's so many issues of concern out there. It's just crazy.
Wow. I mean, for one thing, there's no democracy in Tauranga, so it's perfect that you're there, Sue.
Yeah, it is. Look, and these issues are just getting more and more serious now, because the more I listen to people, the more I hear about all of these other issues. The issues about the spending. We have these commissioners, and they are just spending like there's no tomorrow. And yet, on the other hand, putting up the rates, I think 20%. So at the very time, people can't afford to buy cauliflower or some bananas or milk or bread, and then their rent is going up, their rates are going up. Everything is just so out of control here. It's mad
Well,
town.
it's like a puaka. I don't know if you know. I don't want to use the Pākehā translation, but a puaka. If people look it up, to the trough, that's what it feels
Mm-hmm.
like. I mean, if you want to spend money on a statue and a museum, millions and millions and millions of dollars, and that's why it's so important that people put their hands up for local governments. So I've had in my lives people want to run for the outdoors party here in Kirikiriroa, and so I said, so for my electorate in the general election, I'm the whole of Hauraki, so you can fit 13 general seats in there, and I said, look, if people are interested, let's start getting organised now, and we'll form a whānau team. So people are starting to think now. So because I've been promoting you on my page about
Oh,
actually putting their names forward, potentially under our banner, and so we've got opportunities there as well. So, but at the moment, our focus is on you, getting you. Why is it so important to get you into Parliament, Sue?
because none of the 120 MPs who are there at the moment are listening to the people. And all of the parties who are there at the moment are like a big franchise group who are listening to the globalists. Nobody's listening for the people of New Zealand. And it seems like they start out maybe with good intention, but over time they get taken over. And, for example, the MP in Whanganui, she went out and actually tried to speak to some of the protesters about the mandates, and then she got publicly caned by their leader, Chris Luxon. Now, we made a press release at the time saying, how wrong is that? She was doing exactly what any good MP would do, which is listening to the people. How wrong is it that her leader tells her off for that? And how wrong is it that he thinks it's okay to tell her off for that? Like, he thinks it's a good thing to tell her off, whereas from the public perception, it's a completely wrong thing for them to close down the people's voice and close down our elected representatives. It's not their elected representatives, it's our elected representatives. So, Donna, just what you were saying about encouraging people to stand for the local elections, it doesn't work here in Tauranga because we don't have any local elections because of Commissioner Nana Mahuta has decided that her commissioners will continue for another term, although I believe there are people looking at challenging this, and I'm very happy to help them challenge it because I believe it's so wrong. But elsewhere in New Zealand, we've got local body elections coming up this year for the councils, for the regional councils, and for the DHB. And it was so important to get some new faces there who will represent what the real people are thinking, not what the corporates want, not what big business want, but what the real New Zealanders want. So, we're there to support anybody. Look, it's a big learning curve. It's pretty scary when you get yourself out there and you see yourself on all these big posters and billboards and in newspaper ads, and people keep ringing asking for information. It's a little bit scary, but also you feel like you're doing some good for your community. It's a really good chance to talk about these issues that normally there's no chance to talk about. And then you find that there are all these other people that are thinking the same thing, but they've been scared to talk about it because they thought they were the only one. So it's just waiting for that first one to speak out.
And that's you.
Well, and you, Donna, you as well. I mean,
Oh, yeah, no one can turn this waha off, but not when I'm passionate. But you're absolutely right when it comes to party politics and towing the party line. These ministers were elected to represent their constituent seats, and if their people are saying, these are all our concerns, then what we've got to realise is that there is party politics, and a lot of politicians, and there probably are some really good politicians in Wellington, they were silenced. I mean, look at Louisa Wall, as someone has mentioned. I mean, she resigned because they tried to silence her as well, and so she had to resign, and she come out with some damning comments about Labour and saying for Māori anyway to reconsider. So here's the reason why I'm the co-leader for the Outdoors and Freedom Party, because I have found a new political home for our people, a political home, a party that's going to listen to their concerns, share their concerns, and have a new whare to come to. So I'm really excited about that, Sue. But this is not about me. This is all about you.
But what it is about is unity for the people and showing how when we listen to each other, we understand each other, and we find that we all have so much in common. So last Thursday, we had a fabulous event at the Mount Community Hall, and we invited Renee de Monche, who's a long-term psychiatrist, and Rawiri Te Kowhai, who's a Maori spiritual healer. And what a fabulous event. We talked about medical politics, and we talked about this medicalization, pharmaceuticalization of medical politics, and we talked about the mandates and how good people with years of experience working for their communities had been put out of their jobs because of this mandate with the vaccination, no jab, no job. And we also was a beautiful conversation about there's so much more to us than each little part of our body separately, but that actually it's the entire body and the spirit of the body and the energy of the body that makes so much difference. And what was amazing for me and for a lot of the people there was what the psychiatrist Rene Demonche was saying was almost exactly the same as what the Maori spiritual healer was saying, Rari Te Kowhai. And so actually, when we sit down and listen to each other, we're all saying much the same thing. If you take the money out of it and you take the politics out of it and you just listen to your gut instinct and you listen to your own good common sense, you come up with the same answers. It was very powerful, very, very powerful. We're doing another one this Thursday on science and politics. So science,
Wow.
politics, and disinformation. And we have Jodie Brunning, who's a sociologist, lovely
Yes.
lady, amazing lady. So Jodie is speaking with me, and we may have a few other guest speakers that we call on. We take questions from the floor. We have a panel discussion. We have a bit of a conversation about some of these things, like how did it get to the state that science is bought? And science, how can it be that we can't question our information anymore, because science has always been evolving and learning as we get new evidence, and now we're told there's only one truth and that
One.
there's only one answer. So it's been a great opportunity to have some of these conversations that we weren't having before and getting people together. And we had a great crowd last week. We had a full house, and we're hoping to get a full house again. We can probably even squeeze in a few more chairs. All the chairs were taken, but we can squeeze in some more this week if more people want to come and join us 7 o'clock at the Mount Community Hall for these important conversations that the government have been not wanting us to have. Well, let's just go and have them anyway.
Well, she's on our PM is on a big promo tour in the US and gloated about the 95% treatment rate. And what the world doesn't realize is that people were coerced. And there's no real science, even with the treatment injured and those that are passed away. There's no real science, and that this is personal for me. I mean, that I have to head to Plymouth shortly because my papa's back in hospital, and it breaks my heart. So, but it also gives me fuel in the puku to carry on, because this is a big fight. It's a spiritual fight. So, I've been doing our national anthem as the karakia, waiting for people to come on to my live. And it's beautiful. The words are outstanding. There are several verses, but so we've decided just before you come on that we're going to do a petition to bring the national anthem, so that they have to stand. All these politicians, we're bringing righteousness and bringing, righteousness and godliness back into Parliament, because they took karakia away. Now, when people think about it, our national anthem is a karakia. So those that refuse to acknowledge our national anthem or refuse to stand for our national anthem, this is my vision, will be exposed. Because if you don't stand for God, then you must stand for something else.
Yeah, you've got to stand for whatever you call it. This is the thing. Whether we call it God or whether we call it nature or whatever we call it, that energy that is there, that is actually looking after us, that's shielding us. We just have to connect in with that and listen and learn and respect, this whole respect of the connectedness of things. And that is what the government is doing. Divide, divide, divide. Try and find the smallest differences between us. And our challenge is to keep finding the unity and the connections between us that come from us all being on the planet. We're all breathing the same oxygen. We're eating the same carbon. We're all in this together. Like I say, we're all in the waka together. Let's make it work for us.
I just had my whanaunga ask, are there any hangis for sale? Well, Charlie, you might have to do that as a fundraiser for the Outdoors and Freedom Party.
But There's
Pardon?
a big event. There's a big event also tomorrow night. The Freedom and Rights Coalition are having a follow-up event because the last one was such a powerful event. You know, it was, I think, over 400 people there. They're having an even bigger event tomorrow night at the same venue, this flying museum and near the airport. And
Awesome.
calling in all of the minor party, smaller party candidates, and I think some of the others. I said to them, why not invite National and Labor candidates and we can get them asked some questions too, and let's see how they stand out under a bit of pressure from the public. So I'm not sure who's coming, but I'll definitely be there. And hopefully many of the others will be there and we can have a really good night tomorrow. And we need our supporters along. It's great to have our supporters, our own supporters there, but also bring your friends along who haven't really heard of politics before, who think it's all a bit of a mystery. Bring them along and get them to come and listen to what we're talking about, because whether we like politics or not, it affects us. The people that get into Wellington make decisions that affect our lives. And if we want to have a say in that, we have to make sure that we choose who goes to Wellington. Because if we don't vote, everybody else is choosing for us.
Exactly, and that's what I've tried to say to whānau, and did that as a young wahine. I refused to vote. It was a protest vote, but what I didn't realise then, when the left don't vote, when they protest, it automatically goes over to the right, so it's an automatic vote
Mm-hmm.
for the right. So we can't afford to lose those votes, and that's awesome that is it Freedom and Rights Coalition are helping to support the minor parties, because you've had times when you've been kicked out of or not
Yeah,
allowed in
not a
to any of these public speaking venues. What happened there, Sue?
Yeah, look, it's shocking, I believe. That so the Chamber of Commerce said that only National Labor and ACT could come to their meeting. So I was allowed to go and watch if I paid $10 to enter. So I did do that because I thought it was really important to listen to what they were saying. And I actually did get to ask one question about the mandates, which none of them answered. Except Labor basically said that we're only halfway through COVID. So this
Oh,
is Jan Tinetti, who's a cabinet minister. She said, no, we're meeting in cabinet all the time. We're only halfway through it. So if we want to get out of it faster, we definitely have to get another voice in that keeps asking these questions that nobody wants us to ask. So that was the Chamber of Commerce, a very closed shop meeting. And then the next night, Sun Live, which is the local newspaper, they had a meeting with 4 candidates, and so National Labor, ACT, and one other candidate. They wouldn't let me in either, even though I asked, and a lot of people asked and said, why is Sue not there? They wouldn't let me in. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go along to the venue and I'll have a look at this one and see what they've got to say. Well, this time I wasn't even allowed in the venue. They said, no, it's a private meeting. A private meeting about public democracy, how
yeah.
by a local newspaper. How do you justify that? So that's when I went outside and I did my live stream. Actually, that went viral. So that was really good. Just talking about, well, how can you have a democracy when so many voices are excluded?
That's right, and I guess that's the knuckle of the problem. Yes, with the party's name, outdoors, so the environment is
Mhm.
really important. But like I said, without sovereignty of the people, without sovereignty of our environment, and then sovereignty of our parliament, and protecting democracy, then all of that, protecting our community, protecting our environment goes out the window, because they
Mm.
dictate what happens and the people
Yeah.
don't. So you're doing amazing work, and I think it's a compliment when they don't let you in the door. You know why? Because they don't kick a they don't. There's a saying that you don't kick a dead dog, meaning they're afraid of what you're going to
Yeah.
expose.
Yeah.
And so we
Well,
just have to be innovative and creative, and sharing you on my lives is so important. Now, I did have a question, and I was looking through some of it. We've got a lot of people that have come online. Will Sue be uniting with other minor parties like the Freedom and Rights Coalition?
Yeah, so I'm working. Well, I'm speaking at their meeting tomorrow night, and I totally support the idea of working together. As you know, Donna, we had a hui with some of the other minor parties a few weeks ago at Murupara. We didn't get the cooperation that we were hoping for, but at least we got people talking. And when people are talking, anything is possible. So we're going to have another go at this and see what we can do. It's harder than it sounds, because some of the other minor parties have got very fixed views on some things, and they don't necessarily fully align with our views. And the same, like, I'm very keen on listening to all of the views, and I think the Outdoors and Freedom Party, we sort of sit in the middle, really. You know, we
Yes,
get
we
on with
do.
we,
We
we get
do.
on with everybody. We just want a fair hearing for everybody. We're not totally committed to one view over another, but we just want people to be heard. But some of the other parties do have some quite strict um, bottom lines, and it makes it really, really difficult for us all to work together. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying. And
Mm.
because if we don't work together, we don't get anybody in Parliament. You know, this
That's
is the
right.
thing. It doesn't have to be a perfect, nobody is going to be perfect unless you do it yourself. Like, if you think you can do better, go for it, do it yourself. And if you can do the best job, I'll support you. But if at the moment we go for the best that we've got to get a freedom, democracy, accountability, people's voice into Parliament, because one people's voice will be so much better than no people's voices. Then we can receive the petitions, we can ask the hard questions that nobody's asking, we can invite our friends, our supporters, our networks into Parliament, so that the people become part of Parliament again. We can challenge people like Trevor Mallard serving trespass notices on the people when the people come to the People's Parliament. Like, how can it be? How can it be that he could even think that he could get away with that? He did, because it's all party franchises, and he knew that he had a deal with all of those elected representatives that nobody would stand up for the people. So, you know, we don't have to agree exactly with the other parties, but we do have to work out how we can get a freedom voice into Parliament to ask all these questions that nobody's asking. You know, it's been this week, it's taken from the 2nd of March, that terrible display of police brutality.
Yes.
And Alan Simmons, who was our co-leader, who stood down for Donna to step up, but he's still our president. He was really badly injured. He suffered a fractured hip, and he waited outside. We were just watching some of the videos again yesterday. It was actually 4 hours he was waiting from the time of the injury until an ambulance came and took him to hospital. So at least 4 hours. I made a complaint on his behalf the next day, the 3rd of March, and I've made a series of follow-ups, and it's only a couple of days ago that a police officer contacted me and said, okay, we are going to now investigate this complaint. So that's March, April, May, over nearly 3 months waiting for the police to investigate a brutal assault that resulted in Alan suffering a fractured hip and being in hospital for 6 days, and suffering a huge amount of pain ever since then. He's getting better and better at walking, but he's still getting a lot of pain. It's still quite debilitating. So, you know, this is the kind of thing, that's rule of law, we call it, that everybody must obey the law. You can't be excused from the law because you're a police officer or you're an MP or anything else. You have to still obey the law. But again, if they're all looking after each other in the system, they're forgetting the people on the outside of the system who they're supposed to be representing. So, you know, this is another reason why we need to get our voices into the system to get these things followed up. But good on the police officer. He's an inspector. He seems to be quite senior. We've given him the videos that he's asked for that show what happened. We went through a whole lot of the old videos from that terrible day on the 2nd of March. And look, you know, you could see those police storming down the street from 6 o'clock in the morning, just shoving people out of the way, shoving elderly people, shoving children, shoving all sorts of people, just push, 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 move, move, move. It is not at all how it should be. But luckily the people were smart and we got a lot of good videos of that. So we've actually got it documented, because, you know, if the police in New Zealand don't wear body cameras, and I've asked them, why don't you wear body cameras? Like
Yes.
other countries, the police have to wear body cameras so that we can see what they're actually doing. I can't understand why they don't want to wear body cameras, except that I think that they think they can get away with things.
Well, Māori have asked for many, many years, and I've been an advocate in this space for the police to wear body cams, because our people, Māori, if you're brown, a young male from poorer communities, you're 11 times more likely to be shot dead than their Pākehā
Wow.
counterparts. And the police are 11 times more likely to shoot dead, mainly Māori, than their UK counterparts, whose population is 13 times ours. So there's absolute justification, and we saw. So Māori have been dealing with police brutality for nearly 200 years, and we've been asking for accountability. And to be honest, Sue, I don't have faith in the Independent Police Conduct Authority, which used to be the Independent Police Complaints authority. I don't have faith. There was a survey done a number of years ago now, where 80% of the complaints weren't upheld and only 20% were upheld, compared to the UK, where 80% were upheld. That's complaints. And only 20% decline. So I tend to feel that that's an authority that's there to protect the careers of corrupt police. And if there's no body cams, and I'm really serious about this, if there's no body cams and police are arguing against body cams, then they've got something to hide. And Māori know exactly what it is. Even myself personally, what people don't realise is 4 days out of the last election, there was a protest here in Kirikiriroa, and it was to do with the bird sanctuary, where we had our big hui here. And I actually, there were kaumātua and kuia that were protesting, and I was there to interview. And they were getting assaulted by the police. And this kuia, who was in her 70s, she was the only one left, because all the men had been taken and locked away in the police paddy wagon. And I was looking around and I thought, crikey, no one's there to protect her. So I jumped the fence and I jumped over her. She was laying on the ground by that time, and I was protecting her. They took her away. They had 4 police officers. They grabbed her arm and a leg each and carried her away like that. And I was still recording all of this. I was still recording live, and I got over 200 views of my live. It went absolutely viral around the world. Then the police officer, who happened to be a Māori police officer who my children knew, told it was a bulldozer that they were trying to put onto the property that they were stopping, told the bulldozer to bowl me over.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it was caught on camera. It was all, and I thought they started backing it back onto me, and it was like literally centimeters away from my phone. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is how I'm going to go.
Wow. Well done you, Donna. Well done you. It's pretty scary, isn't it? You get caught up in those frontline situations, and you're there and recording it is, I mean, what I realized is you can't stop things happening at the time, but you can at least get good evidence of it, so that at least you've got something you can go back and use later on to hold people to account. Because if the police keep getting away with these things, we lose trust in our police. Well, if we had much trust, I mean, some people had trust already, some people had lost trust, but I think after Wellington, most of New Zealand have lost trust in our police and in our media.
That's right.
And we have to rebuild that trust. Now, wouldn't that be a good thing for them to offer to wear body cams, especially when they're wearing riot gear and that type of gear? I
Oh,
mean,
well, those
that,
knuckle busters. They were wearing those
yeah,
knuckle busters, so they went in there. So what happened though? So just to finish my story, I know this interview is not about me, but it highlights what happened with the occupation. As the police officer came along, he from behind, he shoulder barged me. He put my arm, twisted it right up to the back of my head, which I still have problems to this day. And I still got to get treatment on it. A young man shoulder barged me to the ground, and
wow.
my head actually knocked on the ground like I was semi concussed. And then these Pākehā police officers come along and put me into the police car. He dragged me out of the police car and threw me into the paddy wagon with the men in a,
Wow.
in a cold metal paddy wagon. Then he was speaking te reo and te reo Māori with me, and I was responding back in English because I was one of those ones that lost the reo, one of those generations that lost the reo. And I can kōrero, but not in a fluent way if you're a fluent speaker. And then I answered him back in English because I knew what he was saying, and he laughed at me. He actually laughed at me for not having the reo, and I said to him in English, I swore at him and said to him, it's because of me, who were with those mamas that fought for the language, fought
Yeah.
for koranga reo, fought for kaupapa, that you actually have the reo because we missed out on it. So what it
Mm.
showed, there was so much abuse. There was so much abuse that happened to me, and I was protecting a queer in a protest, but it did go
Yeah.
viral, and it showed me personally how brutal the police can be, because they treated me how they would treat a young buck. They
Yeah.
assaulted me, a woman nearly in her 60s, and they assaulted me. So I can imagine. And when I saw it, I wasn't there. I was down in Wellington at the occupation, but I wasn't there on the 2nd of March. And I saw it, and I got a bit of post-traumatic stress disorder because I knew
Mm.
what it felt to be assaulted by the police. Terrible.
Yeah, well, terrible. And I think a lot of us got a bit of post-traumatic stress disorder watching what went on because, they all came down the road in their riot gear, shields, helmets, knuckle dusters, padded legs sometimes. And it was just up against people that had just woken up in the morning, come out in their T-shirts and their jandals and no protective gear. And, when you look at those videos again, especially those videos in the morning when I was there, the people were so calm. Nobody was fighting. The odd person was saying a few things that maybe that the police didn't like, but it wasn't that bad. But then other people were calming them down. And so the community were together saying peace, love, aroha. And there was no excuse for that police conduct that day when they just came like a rioting gang down Hill Street, which is where I was watching from, just literally smashing people out of the way and smashing tents out of the way. That was a predetermined riot by the police. And I don't condone what happened later in the afternoon, but that first morning, the protesters were blameless. Like the protesters were so well behaved. It was the police shielded the protesters from being able to go to the toilet first thing in the morning. I mean, even things like that. Why would they do that? You've given me another thought, Donna, too, because a lot of the work I've done in the past is with medicinal cannabis law reform. And, I've done a lot of submissions to Parliament for Rose Renton and some of the other green fairies that were trying to make cannabis more accessible because, a lot of people understand now that CBD doesn't have any psychoactive effect, but what it does do is it's really good for anxiety and stress relief and just supporting the immune system and doing all kinds of benefits. In fact, they've used it for COVID really successfully as well. Um, surprise, surprise, the natural
Surprise,
remedy
surprise.
work every time, well, almost every time. So, and I've also done a lot of defending with people that have been charged with cultivating cannabis for medicinal purposes or possession for medicinal purposes or making it to give to other people. So making it to supply to sick people who can't afford the pharmaceutical drugs or who find that just the natural plant works better for them. And of all the people I've defended, almost all of them have been discharged without conviction because when we've explained to the court that they're having to choose, these people are choosing between their health and the law. And if you have to choose between your own health or your family's health and the law, it's a very difficult decision, but most people would choose their health. And when the district court judges are given the information, they understand that too. And almost all of those cases, they've given my clients a discharge without conviction, which is good. I mean, I still don't think the police should even put it through the court to start with, because that's a lot of stress for people. But at least the courts are listening and giving a good outcome. But then I had one case, and it was a Maori gentleman in the central North Island who he came to me with this bag of medications, a bag full of pharmaceutical opioids, this, that, and everything else. He said, look, this stuff makes me so ill. But what works for me is cannabis. And cannabis in combination with kawakawa and some honey, some natural products. He'd been a major professional sportsman, and he had a huge amount of injuries over the years. And as he got a little bit older, his body was really hurting, but he'd found a way of fixing that. So the local police raided him once, and we got him a discharge without conviction, which was great. But then the police came back and raided him again. Like, why would the police come back and raid someone a second time for growing cannabis when they know that they're growing it for their medicinal use and the court has already said, yes, you can have a discharge without conviction? And so, I do raise that because I completely understand what you're saying about Maori being treated worse than other people. And this type of situation, again, the first judge was very good. The first judge, he listened, he understood, we presented the information, he understood the benefits of this natural herb. But for the police to then go back again and pick on the same person again, I just don't understand what they were trying to achieve.
Well, they wanted to lock him up. That's what they wanted to achieve. They wanted to make a point and use him as an example. And that's why we have to change the lawsuit, because we spend a lot of money on pharmac and pharmaceuticals, and there's no support. Like with my husband, as you know, he's got lung disease, and anything, he can pick up anything and he gets sick. So I use natural rongoa as well as the stuff that the doctor give him, which I don't call rongoa, it's medicine. Right? It's drugs. It's drugs. The rongoa I give him, I call rongoa. The stuff the doctor gives him is drugs. But he needs a combination of both to stay alive. And it cost me and him an arm and a leg to get these natural products. And we should be able to pick and choose whether or not we want pharmaceutical drugs or whether or not we want to use natural products. And if we think, and thank you for bringing up about marijuana, because we have to remember we've got a pee epidemic, and in our community, in Māori communities, it's destroyed a whole generation. A whole young generation are addicted on pee. And now one way to take out a culture, a people, one way to genocide them is by taking them out with drugs. Right? And so we got to remember when United Future Peter Dunn brought in where he legalized the use of synthetic marijuana. Now I know this because whaanau have told me this. Whaanau who are now addicted to pee, and I'm talking about close members of my family, they were pot smokers prior to the legalizing of synthetic marijuanas. When they legalized synthetic marijuanas, they moved from pot into using that because they could go down the street and buy it legally and weren't afraid of being arrested. And then was a couple of years later, they made it illegal again. And so they tried to go back to pot and found that pot wasn't strong enough. And so they tried pee because pee was stronger than the pot. So that whole process was the gateway to the pee epidemic. And I hold that party and Peter Dunn and his son, who we talk about conflict of interest, and maybe in another interview. We can have a talk about nepotism.
Yeah.
I know you've got to go shortly, Sue, but there is cronyism, there is nepotism within our governments. And Peter Dunn's son was working for the synthetic companies, synthetic marijuana companies, as a lawyer.
Yeah.
So we've got to, when something happens in our community, we've got to reflect back to those governments and see what process happened to create, like what we're seeing now is a lot of ram raids and a lot of desperate and I'm talking about that generation of peer addiction. So
Mm.
let's look back at what happened in the past to see why we're here where we are today. And once you see the full picture, you get a different view on things. And that's why
Yeah.
we have to have people like yourself, Sue, in Parliament to ask the hard questions.
Yeah, you definitely come up with a very different answer when you look at what causes these things. It's very easy for people to say, oh, yeah, come down, get more police, do this, do that. But what we need to do is look at what's causing the problem in the first place so that we can then stop that problem getting worse and worse and worse. And it's the same with a lot of these problems. You know, with the mandates, people lost their jobs, and so then they became more desperate because children couldn't go to school. They dropped out of school because they didn't learn very well online, and then they became unemployed, left school, had nothing to do all day but to get out in the streets and cause trouble. Now, my focus is how can we bring these people back into the community, because it's no good for anybody when we have people falling out on the outside of the community and feeling isolated. We've got to find ways of reconnecting and bringing them back into their whānau, into the community, so that we can all look out for each other. And that was what I loved in Wellington. You know, we had people from everywhere, but everybody was included. Everybody was looking out for everybody. And what a beautiful community we could create out of that when the police and the politicians left us alone. But, you know, when the police left us alone, it was the most beautiful. There was beautiful singing, there was art, there was massage, there was amazing food, everybody doing whatever it took to make it work. And so we just have to try and find new ways of doing these things that make our lives better, get rid of the red tape and the rules and the control and the bullying from the state, get the
Mm.
government back in their own box where they belong instead of interfering in our lives and our homes, and actually let the people take some responsibilities for their own lives and for making good decisions without all these bad influences that keep trying to trip us up and get us into trouble all the time.
Well, we need to even look at our constitutional makeup, and that's an area of passion for mine because
Mm,
there's no way of holding politicians accountable for corruption. There's no way of holding politicians accountable for bringing global influences into our policy making, into our white papers, into our legislation, because they come in through white papers, then they're discussed, and then they're turned into legislation. It's our people that should decide what sort of laws we have rather than
mm,
global. So our constitution doesn't protect us from that. Our
yeah.
constitution at the moment can be usurped through Section 5 of the Bill of Rights, and you know this yourself, Sue.
Mm,
And we could do another interview on that. I just love talking to you, and I know you're really busy, and I'm conscious of the time. But there's so much, and me and you, I think we work well because we see the same things together. And I look at it about the impact, because I always say Māori is the canary in the mine. What happens to us first is
mm,
going to happen to the rest of the community after this. So if we can help Māori, we can help the rest of the community. And there are so many issues. I mean, we were on the brink prior to COVID, and now a lot of our people have gone over,
mm,
and it's desperate times. And what you're seeing with the ram raids and these kids, literally as well. What we're also seeing is no due process, no accountability. I feel we're living in a banana republic. Like you spoke about earlier about the rule of law and natural justice. I have several experiences
mm,
of my own whānau who weren't allowed due process process, and that's going to take time to go through the courts to sort that out. So at the moment, if the government can act unlawfully, everybody else, all and sundry, think they can act unlawfully as well. So we're literally living in a banana republic, and I cringed when I saw our Prime Minister promoting our country as if everything was honky dory, and if those politicians over the US, if the media over the US followed, it just went on Facebook and followed even mainstream news, they could see how upset and divisive what that's the country she's created, unfortunately.
No wonder she doesn't want people speaking out on Facebook, because that's where people can live stream events and show the truth of what's really happening and get away from the spin that she is creating. This whole idea that the Prime Minister can run the government on spin and try and close down all of the voices of the people. It's just such an upside down, inside out system. Then we really, really have to unite to stand up against that, because it's not helping anybody. It might be helping her career over in the United Nations, but it's certainly not helping any of us.
Well, I have more of a cynical mind, only because of our experience as Māori, as our experience, and so that trauma has been passed down through generations, and so now we're at this position where it's happening to the whole community rather than portions of the community. And so I'm a lot more suspicious of the agendas, and I seem to be the only politician that is actually opposing this government. Everybody else seems to be. I mean, they'll oppose a few points, but they actually haven't gone to the core of the issues. No one's going.
I love your idea of having a talk about the Constitution. Maybe we want to have one of our Thursday evening events talking about democracy. So maybe we can get you over here and be on the panel and talk about that. That would be a great conversation to have. I'd love to do that.
Awesome. Yes. And sorry that I haven't been over there from the last time I was there. I've been dealing with a sick husband, and then with my papa. But I try and use my medium, which our last interview went viral, and there were quite a few from Tauranga that tuned into our one too. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say.
Absolutely. And just want to say, I've got a much better web page set up now. It's a lot easier to read. So www.sugreytauranga.co.nz. So I'm trying to put as many of these videos on there as I can. We've had a bit of help to make it look much prettier and easier to use and everything. So that's got lots of information about things and some of these events that we're having and all of those things. I've just realized, Donna, the time. I'm really, really sorry, but I'm going to have to go because I've promised to be somewhere else. But I really love talking to you, and I'm really hoping we can talk again soon, and also that your travels go well for your dad and your family. I'm really thinking of you there. And without health, our lives are very difficult. But so I totally understand. But when you're ready, come back and see us up here, and we'd love to have you here speaking together at some events up here.
Awesome, I'll do that. And the problem is I can't plan now because I just don't know what my future holds. But even if I'm in New Plymouth, my daughter said, "Mum, you need to schedule Sue in." So I'll see if we can. We'll talk offline and see if we can schedule a time, even if I can't make it over. But I'm hoping to. Just depends on my papa. I won't make promises, but I definitely do want to be part of. I want to be more active than I have been. So my apologies for that, Sue.
Oh, no, look, I gratefully receive all of your time and wisdom, Donna. It's you've got a hugely important perspective, and we need to get this out there to the world much more. So really appreciate talking to you every time we can, and we make it work as best as we can. And we're very adaptable. When there's an opportunity, here we all are again. We jump up and we do what we can do. So that's what we can do, especially with the small parties where people are just committed to doing everything they can do. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is, what time of the day it is. If we can squeeze it in, let's go and do it.
Awesome. I love that. I love the ability as well, because I'm a bit like that. If I can squeeze something in, I'll do it. You have an awesome day, Sue. Give my regards to Alan and the team. You're doing awesome, awesome mahi. Awesome.
Thank you, Donna, and you too. We'll talk again soon. Safe travels.
Ka
Bye
kite.
bye. Ka kite.
Oh, that was awesome, whānau, having Sue on my live. Isn't she amazing? We're quite in sync with each other. Our values are very, very similar. And, it's just a privilege. She's really busy. I mean, I should be over there, but, my papa is my first priority. And we're just waiting for my husband who has been unwell. We haven't been tested yet, but I told you in a number of lives that they shut down our pools, which we attend every day, because all the staff had got COVID, so they had to shut them down. And I did ring up Hamilton City Council and say, but hey, haven't they all been double vaxxed and boosted? They shouldn't be. I mean, that's what the government's saying. Now the government's asking for the fourth booster, and people are saying, well, the last three didn't work. Why would we put ourselves in harm's way? We've heard that people are vaccine injured. So the message is getting out there. People are starting to wake up. People are starting to hear about those stories. And uh, my priority when I go and see my dad, it absolutely just breaks my heart. Absolutely breaks my heart. But I do have to make sure that my husband as well, and when we travel down, that we're not taking any diseases down from here down to there. So hopefully we'll be able to travel today, if not today, definitely tomorrow. What I wanted to talk about today is what Gareth Morgan said. Why should we tax EVs? Those are EV vehicles, right? Electric vehicles. And I think that this is something. Oh, thank you, Coco. Thank you, Christine. Wilma, Lavinia. Oh, you fellas are awesome. Awesome. What's that? Maverick, thank you for tuning in. Yeah, sorry. She is our elected PM. So yeah, but I hear what you're saying, Maverick. Andrea, what does Andrea say? I'll just put it up so we can read it. Hearing about what Dunn and his son got away with is so infuriating. Frickin'. I know I was angry enough with this synthetic. It hit my kids also, but to know the corruption behind it. Yeah, and we have to remember, so they addicted a whole generation that were pot smokers. I can say I tried pot when I was 18. I actually this is true. I actually thought it was a cigarette. It had more of an impact than the cigarette, so I didn't actually know what I was smoking. Bit naive back in the day, but that was my experience of pot, and I'm not a pot smoker. But that was my experience. So I don't know which adult hasn't tried pot when they were young kids. So that was at the age of 18 when I'd gone to a function with friends and they were passing it around. I mean, I didn't even take notice of the smell because we were outside, and that someone just handed it to me and I took it and I breathed it in and started choking on it, and that was the last time that I tried pot. But anyway, it is what it is. But my point is, when you go from pot smoking to synthetics, and as whānau, I'm talking immediate whānau here, close relations have said to me, Mum, it's the synthetic that addicted people to pee. It was the gateway to pee. So Peter Dunn, National Party, and your son, you're responsible for addicting a whole generation of pee addicts. And like I say, one way to destroy a community is putting drugs into it. So I'm pretty cynical as far as I'm concerned. But we're seeing those major issues acting out now. But remember, the seed was planted back a few years back. But going back to Gareth Morgan, I'm going to read out his and just food for thought, whānau? So why should we tax EVs? I have an EV and I love it. New tech always excites me, and for the taxpayer to pay me to make the switch was unadulterated joy, he says. My new car runs on coal rather than oil. Yes, I have moved to the worst polluting fossil fuel there is. Shame about the planet. So what you got to remember about Gareth Morgan, and I used to follow him before I actually became part of the Opportunities Party, is he's an environmental warrior, and he spends a lot of his money supporting poor communities around the world. So creating fresh drinking wells for them, educating poor communities. So I was quite impressed with his philanthropic uh, um, heart, I guess, because when you have a philanthropic heart and you go into these communities, and that's why he travelled the world with his wife. I was, yeah, he was a good leader. However, we do see we do sit on opposite sides when it comes to the pandemic and the treatment. But when it came to his policies around the environment and policies around people, he actually has a good heart. New Zealand burns Indonesian coal to fire the Huntly Power Station. So we import coal, and the Huntly Power Station is just down the road from me, and we use that coal to fire up the Huntly Power Station. Thanks to climate change and the sorry states of our glaciers, our hydro networks' capacity to supply sustainable electricity to New Zealanders is falling away. To make up the difference, we burn coal. The big push to EV represents a lift in New Zealand's demand for electricity. We will burn coal to provide all of that. Care to join me and switch from one fossil fuel to the next, and one whose emissions are 30% worse? So we think that we're going from fuel to something that's more environmentally friendly. But Gareth Morgan actually explains it's the complete opposite. And so this sort of sits in line with me in regards to the refinery, and reason even more so why we should protect our only oil refinery, and it keeps us independent from relying on the world, because once you start relying on other countries, then they can cut off supply. And we're seeing what happens when supply is cut off, and that's how they can bully, and that's how they can control sovereign states. So we need to be aware of all these issues. And Gareth Morgan is highlighting that we think we're heading down a pathway, and we think we're doing ourselves justice, and the government throws millions and millions of dollars at this. I mean, billions of dollars. They're throwing billions of dollars here, there, and everywhere, but not where it counts. Not to pay for our nurses, not to put them on good salaries. Not looking after our frontline response people that look after us. No, they're putting money into doing up oil refineries and then reconstructing them. Billions of dollars actually. So this government's out the gate. This government's out the gate. Its spending is out the gate. But I don't know if National is any better, to be honest, because they all have agendas, and we've seen that. So our eyes are wide open now, whānau, and we've got to start opening the eyes of the rest of the whānau to see what's going on. So fossil fuels already provide. So sorry, where am I? We will burn coal to provide all of that. Care to join me and switch from one fossil fuel to the next, and one whose emissions are 30% worse? Fossil fuels already provide 20% of our electricity, 60% of all energy, and its share is rising. At the margin, when we need more power, where do we get it? Indonesia. Our underinvestment in sustainable generation portends that it will be a long time before New Zealand ceases to be a climate change pariah. So he calls us a climate change pariah. That's pretty powerful words. Despite all Jacinda's pretty words and the fact these issues wouldn't even be on Luxon's radar. He's right. And remember the term he coined, and he got a lot of flack for it, lipstick on the pig. Well, he's showing that, He's showing that. So how can New Zealand fix our stupidity? First step would be to halt all sales of EVs until we have built a sustainable way to generate the electricity they need. A corrective tax should do that. So he's saying instead of giving subsidies, thousands of dollars in subsidies, we should be taxing it. Now this is how they get us addicted, right? They use the legislation to get us addicted. You've got a subsidy, so you go and buy one of these electric cars, and boom, Bob's your uncle. Where he's saying that no, we should actually do the opposite. We should be taxing because we are a climate pariah as a country. So this clean green is all caca. That's what he's saying. The clean green is all caca. Getting rid of the smelter would buy some time at least. But the urgent investment should be building more sustainable generation. What are the sustainable sources, you ask? Wind, solar, hydro, and nuclear. Nuclear. Not sure about that. Hydro stuffs the landscape. The cost of building solar and wind towers is soaring thanks to the supply shortages of the relevant strategic metals. Something unlikely to disappear anytime soon, given how Russia and China have such a stranglehold on supply, which leaves nuclear. So he's heading into nuclear. The climate crisis might be the nuclear free moment for Jacinda's generation, but the irony is that progress on New Zealand's contribution to arresting climate change without reversing the nuclear free stance of my generation is impossible. Until that day, it would make more sense to charge the ute tax to a subsidy. Oh, sorry, to change the ute tax. Oh well, because I got a ute. So until that day, it would make more sense to change the ute tax to a subsidy and find it from a tax on EVs. So that's interesting corridor, I think, from Gareth Morgan. And the post he put up an hour ago, he says EV angelism more cult than cogent. He makes me laugh. He shoots from the hip, man. The previous post on coal intensity of raising New Zealand's electricity supply seems to have scattered the chooks. Many respondents got distracted by irrelevancies or failed to appreciate the point being made. So, just to repeat the point, to help keep any discussions on point, he says the addition of 1 kilowatt of electricity supply over and above New Zealand's current capacity comes from burning Indonesian coal. That's right. It's 1,000% coal generated. The shares of existing generation, hydro, coal, geothermal, etc., in the overall supply of electricity are irrelevant to the discussion. All that matters is how do we generate that additional kilowatt. And that is the only reason we burn coal for electricity, because our generation network gets maxed out and we have to turn to coal or start turning off supply. Against this backdrop, consider the current switch to EVs. Every change represents an increase in the demand for electricity and a decrease in the demands for oil. So we use less oil and more coal. How's that work on CO2? pounds of CO2. So he's a scientist. You got to remember this guy is a scientist. He's very wealthy. He has his own research foundation, and all his policies collectively cost millions of dollars out of his own pocket to research on. So this guy knows how to research his stuff. Hence the reason why I'm sharing it with you. Pounds of CO2 entitled to million BTUs of energy. So he goes through this formula, right? And I won't go through the formula because I don't understand it myself. In short, it's a shocker. It raises emission to 235 kilograms per person of offshore coal that New Zealand burns every year. So that's 200. So basically, what he's saying is that per person in New Zealand, and there's nearly 5 million of us, we burn 235 kilograms per person per year of coal, of offshore coal. So remember, we've got to import it in. Remember, we have our Marsden Point refinery up there. So I'm hoping that he's going to get behind Marsden Point. Man, if we get someone like Gareth Morgan getting behind Marsden Point, that would be amazing for us. Who support the protection of Marsden Point, and it gives us more justification and why we should be protecting Marsden Point. But I'll carry on with this. So, yes, our supply from domestic sources is maxed out. Why then are we rushing into EVs? Absolutely, they have the potential to lower emissions, but only if you are getting the additional kilowatt they need from a lower emission source. So what he's saying, if the sourcing of those EV is pushing up emissions, which is higher than using fuel, then it defeats the purpose. We think because it's made out of electricity that we're bringing down the emissions, but what he has explained is actually no. We have become a climate pariah. So I wanted to share that so we understand that. So when it comes time to debating about protecting Marsden Point, that we understand from a science perspective that he's saying EVs are not good, that we shouldn't be subsidizing them, that we should be taxing them because their emissions are higher, that every person burns 230 kilograms of coal per year, times that by 5 million. And then you get a picture of it. So hold up on all those EV sales. Get your electricity generation sorted first so that the next kilowatts come from sustainable or at least lower emission sources than coal, which currently provides 100% of the next kilowatts to New Zealand. So there you go, whānau. Justification. This is justification for holding on to our only oil refinery. That's one of the top oil refineries in the world. So our fuel. So this government is sending us to the brink. The fuel that we have to import will cost us 3 times as much. The EVs aren't working because, as Gareth Morgan has said, it's going to push up our emissions more so than what the fuel emissions are. So you would think that the government would have done their homework on it. If not, well, then they need to contract this scientist to do their work. And I know he gets hoha being an advisor to National or Labour, and hence the reason why he set up his own party, actually. But unfortunately, in politics, there are people in his own party, his 2IC, that turned on him, and then his wife nearly died in an avalanche, and he had to reassess his priorities, and it's a real shame. Because we were impacted by the Opportunities Party, like all other parties, were impacted by the Jacinda effect. and the lipstick on a puaka, lipstick on a pig, didn't help our situation at all. But I respected the man because he spoke his truth. He spoke his truth, and people did fear him because of his truth. But hence, when it comes to the pandemic, we are on opposing sides to that. But doesn't mean to say I don't respect the man and the reasons why I joined the Opportunities Party in the first instance. And it's stuff like that. It's stuff like that. He certainly knows his stuff. So, Whānau, I think I've spoken long enough on this live, and I've still got a few views on. But thank you for listening to me. Sorry that I go on, but it's important stuff, and things are coming up every day. I never run out of stuff to talk about, whānau. So I just appreciate all the time that you give me listening to me rant on about this, that, and the other. But I enjoy having the discussions with you and laying everything out on the table and giving us a broader insight into our world. And thank you for all the questions. Thank you for all the comments to May and to Mo. Thank you for joining us, Andrea, Gillian, Christine, Coco. Yeah, just all of you. Thank you so much, Wilma, Lavinia. It's just awesome. Kia pai tōra ka kite anō kia ora rā.